Welcome to the Sumter School District November 14th meeting. In support of and respect for an open, fair, and informed decision-making process, the Board of Trustees recognize that civil, respectful, and courteous discourse and behavior are conducive to the democratic and harmonious airing of concerns and decision-making, and uncivil discourse and or discourteous and inappropriate behavior has negative impact on the character and productivity of the decision-making process. In an effort to preserve the intent of the open government and maintain a positive environment for all citizens, the following meeting protocol and rule of decorum are being requested. Compliance with the meeting protocol is expected and appreciated. Anger, rudeness, ridicule, obscene or profane language, impatience or lack of respect for others, and personal attack are unacceptable behaviors. This demonstration in support or opposition to a speaker or idea are not permitted at board meetings. The chairman is responsible for maintaining order. Failure to abide by this requirement may result in immediately being removed from the meeting and issuance of a no trespass order to all future board meetings. Thank you for your cooperation. Please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board Meetings and Sumter School District Facebook page. Vision. Sumter School District is committed to educating, empowering, and enriching the lives of all students to reach their full potential. Mission. Sumter School District is committed to providing a safe, nurturing, and high-quality educational environment that supports diversity, equips students for local and global success. Our board members are yours truly, Barbara Jackson, Area 7 Chairwoman, Dr. J. Frank Baker, Seat 8, our Vice Chair, Dr. Darrell McGaney, in his absence, is Area 5, and he's the clerk. Mr. Brian Alston is Area 1. Mrs. Cheryl Ray is Area 2. Mr. Mac McLeod, I think he's supposed to be on his way. Oh, he's joining us virtually, as well as Dr. McGaney. I'm sorry, Dr. McGaney, I didn't see you there. And thank both of you for joining us virtually. Mac McLeod is Area 3. Dr. John B. Hilton is Area 4. Dr. Gloria Lee is Area 6. Dr. Sean Reagan is Area 9. Ms. Denise Jones is our Shaw Air Force Base representative. Dr. William T. Wright is our superintendent, and Ms. Shantae Scott is our administrative manager. This meeting is now called to order. Welcome to Hillcrest Middle School. I also want to thank Principal Tasha Staggers and her staff for hosting this meeting. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Alston?
I would like to ask for this body to amend the agenda to include discussion and executive session of school safety and security. I know tonight that we have an update of policy EBCB, safety plan and drills from the Office of Operations to safeguard the safety and security of our schools. I ask that we add an item to executive session for those questions related to that safety plan. So for executive session, adding school safety and security.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that we amend the agenda to add school safety and security to the executive session agenda. Are there any questions? Hearing none, would you please vote by show of hands as to whether or not you are for or against the motion? Oh, it came up on mine, came up. Did yours come up, Wilson? Are you able to get the count? Okay.
Supported.
The motion passes unanimously. Okay. We're now down to our public participation section, and I will go through the guidelines for public participation. The Board of Trustees is pleased to offer time at the regular monthly meeting each month for public participation both in person and electronically. According to our policy, the board will allocate 15 minutes at the onset of each regular meeting for the public to address the board. The chair reserves the right to limit discussion of the same topic in an effort to provide individuals the opportunity to be heard on a variety of topics. Public participation will not exceed 3 minutes for each individual unless waived by a majority of the board. Consideration may be given to a public hearing for gaining input on critical issues. Speakers may offer objective comment on school operation and programs that concern them. The board will not permit in public sessions any expression of personal complaint about individual school personnel or any other person connected with the school system. At this time, we will open the floor for public comments, not to exceed 15 minutes or 3 minutes for each participant. Following in-person comments, Executive Director of Communication and Community Engagement, Ms. Shelley Galloway, will read the electronic submission if there are any. I have 2 public participation forms before me, and the first is Ms. Lita Beal. Did I pronounce that first name correctly? Latia Beal? Yes, ma'am. Okay, would you please come and have a seat at this table and share your concern with us?
Hello, good evening. My name is Latia Beal, and before I get started, I want to say if this is not the complete form, then I'm really unsure, but this is the only way I can get in front of the decision makers, which is you guys, for my issue at hand. Like I said, my name is Latia Beal. My daughter goes to Pecala Springs. Her name is Layla Beal. In September, we discussed with the principal and teachers about moving her up to the next grade because basically she's kind of bored and she knows everything so far. And she's been tested in September. Everything was in over the 96th percentile or C standards. I have all the documentation. The principal, the teachers, and everyone in Bacala Springs was on board with moving her up. Then there was a form about Title 59 that says that she had to be 6 in order to go to the first grade. I asked them to send the title to me, and in the next paragraph, it actually stated that it can be waived by the local board of trustees, which is why I'm here today. She was again tested again on the first grade level, the beginning of November, and again everything was exceed standards or over 96 percentile. For example, math, she scored a 161. The district grade level was a 138, and for normal was a 140, and that's just for one of the tests. So she turned 6 this month, so they was concerned about her being with her peers, but actually moving her up to the first grade is her being with her peers. So we've been working with the school, but right now we're at a standstill because we're trying to figure out the next step for that waiver. And again, everyone who needs to make that decision, that I can actually get in front of you guys here. And like I said, I have all the documentation for her tests.
Okay, thank you, and if you would like to leave that information with us, we will be happy to accept it. However, your concern would be reviewed by the superintendent and the appropriate individuals.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much for coming before us. Okay, our next person is let me put my glasses on, Ms. Sherry Smith, and you're now able to come before us. Just have a seat at this table, please, Ms. Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I did not expect to be sitting down, but that's okay. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sherry Smith. I will be joining your body in January, and I just wanted to come and thank you all for the wonderful races that you ran during the election. I also wanted to just bring one concern. There's not a lot of time between now and January, and I hope that you will be very judicious and thoughtful in any decisions that you make between now and the first of the year that may have long-term implications, especially for anyone who may or may not, there are several runoffs coming up, who may or may not be on the board in the future. So that we need to think about everything is always about the children. And I would just like to urge you to remember that the decisions are about what's best for the children, and that's why we're here. My other question, I don't know if you can answer or not, is the agenda amendment was to place security and discipline concerns in executive session. I was unclear as to why it had to go to executive session. Y'all can probably clear that up for me, unless it concerns a particular student or employee. I did not know that it had to go to executive session. So that it would be my question to you. Otherwise, congratulations to those of you who won. Good luck to those of you who still have a race ahead, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, and welcome to your seat on the board. Okay. All right. We'd like to thank the two of you that did have input for participation on the during public participation, and we will move on to our board communication. Do we have any board members that have anything for board communication? If not, I will go into the, based on the Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence National Validated Assessment Process, Croswell Drive Elementary School has met the required criteria in the 9 performance areas of high-performing schools required for the Points of Light Award. And those areas are student focus and support, school organization and culture, challenging standards and curriculum, active teaching and learning, technology and integration, professional community, leadership and education validity, school, family, and community partnership, and indicators of success. In addition to the comprehensive review process for the 9 performance area, stakeholders survey, interviews, and a school visit were also completed. Croswell Elementary School will continue on their path to beacon status. Let's all give a round of applause to Dr. Sean Haggerty and Croswell Drive Elementary School family. We would like to say congratulations, Dr. Haggerty and Croswell Drive, on your accomplishment. Trustees, are there any announcements to share at this time? Hearing none, we will now move to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Alston.
The policy committee met, and we are bringing forth one recommendation and an update for the full body. The policy committee would like to bring forth the inception of a safety and school climate committee, and our update for this evening is that we will have an equity audit presentation tonight that I believe Dr. Moore and the administration will present to us later on under the superintendent's report. That concludes the policy committee report for this evening.
Okay, any other additional committee reports? Okay, thank you. Dr. Hilton, do we have a legislative update?
No report tonight.
Okay, no legislative update. Okay, Dr. Wright, please proceed with your superintendent report and everything that falls under that category.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, I want to say good evening to everyone, and we are going to start off by talking about the wonderful things that are going on in our district. We're having a round of district report tonight. First of all, we want to congratulate Crestwood High School and their award-winning drill team for earning 8 awards, including overall first place at the Conway Drill Meet. The drill team also earned first place basic unarmed flight, first place fancy armed flight, first place fancy armed element, first place fancy unarmed element, first place fancy unarmed flight, second place basic armed flight, second place, and third place basic armed flight. So basically, if I may use that word, we went there and racked up this weekend. So certainly proud of that group for that wonderful work. Congratulations are also an honor in order for Alyssa Milbauer, who is being named a 2022 Heisman High School Scholarship winner for Sumter High School. The Heisman High School Scholarship extends the Heisman prestige to our nation's most esteemed high school seniors by recognizing and rewarding outstanding scholar athletes who understand that the most important victories not only happen on the field, but in their schools and communities. This week is American Education Week and presents all Americans with a wonderful opportunity to celebrate public education and honor individuals who are making a difference in ensuring that every child receives a quality education. And next week, I am pleased to announce, is Thanksgiving break week, and that week is going to be November 21st through 25th. I'd like to wish everyone a joyous and filled holiday with relaxation, happiness, great memories, and please, by all means, continue to be safe. And that's going to conclude my superintendent's report for tonight. Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to move on to 5.2, if I might. Madam Chair, members of the board, is that in order?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize Saravia Wright. Oftentimes, especially in education, staff and administration are faced with emergencies every day. However, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize a student whose composure and grace under pressure allowed her to react in an emergency situation. Saravia Wright, who is a health science clinical studies student at the Sumter Career and Technology Center, jumped into action when a visiting career specialist had a medical emergency. Tonight, I would like to personally, as well as have the Board of Trustees join me in taking this opportunity to salute Ms. Saravia Wright for her grace and skill under pressure. Congratulations to her. Is she here tonight? We'll make sure that she gets the certificate. We have created a certificate, but I certainly want all of you, if you will, to please join me in a rousing round of applause for her effort and work. We have all kinds of news about children not doing what they're supposed to do, and I'm certainly just thrilled that she stepped up in the time of need to aid someone and to help save a life. And at this time, I would like to yield the floor to Dr. Moore to come and talk to us and give us an equity audit update presentation. Dr. Lamont Moore.
All right, good evening, Madam Chairperson, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Baker, Vice Chair, Board of Trustees, Dr. Wright. Tonight, we are excited. We've come to a milestone in our work with equity. As you know, in May of 2022, this year, we started this work with the equity audit to support policy ACB, and our goal was to identify strengths, where we were doing things well as it relates to equity in our district, and most importantly, opportunities to improve as it relates to equity. We partnered with Insight Education, third-party company, to lead us in this work of the equity audit, and we have come to the conclusion of that work. Tonight, we have invited a guest, Ms. Raquel Harris, who is joining us from Insight Education, and she is going to take us through the equity audit, highlighting the strengths of our district as it relates to equity, and also giving us an overview of the findings of the equity audit, as well as their recommendations for our school district. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Raquel Harris from Insight Education to lead us in this review. And she is joining us virtually.
Hello, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Like Dr. Moore shared, I am Raquel Harris. I am a senior associate for Insight Education Group, and I have the pleasure to be the partnership manager from Insight to work with Dr. Moore and your team collectively. We have been engaged in this work since May. And as Dr. Moore shared, we're at the end, and actually to me, we're at the springboard space where we see there's a lot of opportunities, and we're really excited about the work that's about to take place in Sumter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a presentation, and I am going to be sharing findings, recommendation. I also am going to go briefly through just the process that we took and going through working with Sumter to compose all that we need in order to do effective audit. At the end of the presentation, if you have any questions, clarifying questions, feel free to share them. All right, if you could just let me know if you're seeing my screen appropriately. You said yes? Whichever way works. All right, and just let me know when I need to move forward. Perfect. All right, so these are just the components of the review. I want to just bring your attention specifically to number 3. I'm going to go through the methodology of what we did starting in May, the pieces of the data collection, and talk to you a bit about that. I'm also going to share with you the findings and recommendations, and then also the strengths, which is the overall assets. So the work for us starts with the utilization of the Insight Equity Framework. We use the framework in order to align student outcomes with access to the 5 domains in the framework in order to ensure that all students have equitable outcomes. So the 5 domains consist of first, structure, system, and resources. And as you can see, some of the examples there, but it really talks about just the systematic approach that the district has in various areas. What does strategic planning look like? How are you allocating your resources? The second domain includes culture and community. This is your engagement with all stakeholders. This also encompasses your discipline and the structures you have around behavior management and just the well-being and safety of your students and staff members. Domain 3, racial equity in the educator's workforce, is specifically the examples there of dealing with recruitment and retention and placement and promotion. Domain 4 involves professional learning and personal growth opportunities. We do look at the instructional professional development that's offered because we're looking at professional learning plans, but we also are looking at things around equity. Is there an opportunity of professional development with staff members regarding equity? And lastly, the last domain is curriculum, instruction, and learning. And that is instructional delivery, your access for different programming at different schools. This representation is the same information, but gives you hopefully a clearer picture when I'm sharing that when you are able to give students opportunity, access to all of the various domains, then students, all students, could have equitable outcomes. And so ultimately, in regards to the domains, these are the various areas that we use to conduct your audit. So just a little details in regards to the data collection. This was an extremely robust set of gathering district data and documentation. And so what we did was we really looked at 2 different types of data. We looked at qualitative data and quantitative data. So the qualitative data, and this is just a couple of examples, we looked at the district strategic plan, organizational charts, school policy annuals, discipline policies, staff recruitment and hiring and placement, promotion policies. We looked at sample job descriptions, sample curricula and instructional materials and lesson plans. We also looked at the list of professional learning opportunities and the sample content of all of those and the various professional learning opportunities. And we also looked at communication that's sent out to different stakeholders and the meeting agendas. Some of the quantitative data included student engagement by grade level, student enrollment by grade level and subgroups, student participation in MTSS and RTI, special education services by subgroups, discipline outcomes by subgroups, enrollment in gifted and honors and college credit, classes, staff roles and experiences, staff hiring. So these are only just some examples of some of the information that we did collect from the district in regards to different data collection. The other component was survey information. We were able to give various 5 different stakeholder groups, including district leaders, school staff, family and caregivers, and secondary students. We were able to provide them with surveys, and we were able to receive over 1,500 surveys that we were able to look through and receive answers in order to analyze data in regards to the work with the equity audit. The one thing that in this particular section I really want to kind of bring to light is that as I'm sharing examples, when I'm showing findings, is that some of the examples in relationship to responses on the survey. So if you see a score of 3.00 or higher, that for us translates to a level of agreement that's considered to be high for education partner groups. Anything less, we saw as opportunities that we could provide some recommendations in order to support next steps with your work around equity. We also conduct focus groups. The focus groups, we looked at the 5 different stakeholder groups again, and with those particular groups, it was something that was confidential, so you'll see some quotes from stakeholders, but nothing was connected with any individual. What we wanted to make sure that when we provided or ran focus groups is that people shared information relevant to Sumter School District. So the first thing that I want to make sure that as we share is the strengths, the overall asset that based on the information that we were able to collect and analyze, that we saw that these were some very strong areas that shine throughout the audit. So the first thing was in Domain 1, which is System Structures and Resources, the district and school leaders demonstrate a commitment to equity, access, and anti-racism, and we saw that strong evidence with just the publishing of your Sumter equity policy. Domain 2, Culture and Community, Sumter School District exhibited a strong ability to build culture throughout the district with its stakeholders. Domain 3, Racial Equity in the educator workforce, with the staff member survey responses, we were able to see that they felt valued as professionals, they're receiving support that they need as educators, and they are possessing a sense of belonging in their local schools. Domain 4, Professional Learning and Personal Growth. Sumter staff members maintain a shared belief they have access to professional learning, opportunities to deepen their understanding of bias, racial and cultural competency, as well as equity and their impact on its impact on education. And lastly, Domain 5, Curriculum Instruction and Learning. The majority of family and caregivers and students who responded to stakeholder surveys agreed or strongly agreed that student academic needs are being met across Sumter School District. So the 2 things that I really want to make sure to highlight and when you're reflecting on findings and recommendations is that number 1, when it relates to overall assets, your strengths is where you start. And we want to make sure that these are highlighted because it is an opportunity to use these various strengths in each domain to springboard the work that you're going to continue to do. The other thing that's important to reflect on is that this information is related to specific groups. So for example, when we are looking at Domain 3, staff member survey responses, staff members with survey responses responded in that way. You might see something different in a finding, but understand that it might be because of the particular group that we were analyzing information from. So the first domain, all I'm going over is overall themes in the findings. And then sharing, of course, the recommendations in each of these domains. So in domain number one of the overall findings is essentially what was one of the strengths, is that Sumter School District demonstrates a commitment from district leaders to intentionally practice educational equity throughout the district. While you're in your early stages of instituting equity work across the district, this is very evident with your recent adoption of a new equity policy. Another finding, overall theme within this domain, is that Sumter leaders do have an established systematic process for reviewing district and student data regularly. You're also using your data to leverage allocations of resources, course enrollment, student enrollment into interventions and special education programming. And as well, you're also working to start eliminating academic gaps between student subgroups through this work. I'm going to give you an opportunity just to briefly read through the 3 bullets at the bottom, because those just give you some specific prompts from the the Sumter District and School Leader Stakeholder Survey. And as you can see, those are at a higher level. Now, one of the things I do want to highlight is that last bullet. You do see that the last bullet that shares my team and I collect, disaggregate, and discuss various data sets to understand and act to eliminate gaps between white students and their Black and brown peers. That isn't quite at a 3. So we definitely know, as we're looking at providing some recommendations, that will be a space for us to look for opportunities. Some other overall themes and finding, while most Sumter School District stakeholders believe equity is important in the district, there is an opportunity for the district to clearly communicate its equity policy and definition of equity with its community. So as you can see, those are some examples in relationship to why this is seen as an opportunity. Sumter School District as school leaders at a 2.74, like a 65% agreed and strongly agreed. And you can read the rest. The last overall finding, we did take time as a share to analyze data that is qualitative. And so part of that work is looking at student handbooks, staff handbooks, and discipline matrix. And so there was evidence of discriminatory language or imagery found throughout some of the text. So just to share examples of that, for example, dress code information, for example, sharing sagging would be something. If you're writing like you can't be sagging, or if a student is wearing a do-rag. While you want to make sure that you're maintaining certain specifics around dress code, we also know that when there's certain groups that, if you generalize, are sagging or who are wearing do-rag. So there's just slight adjustments that we want to make so that it doesn't come across as discriminatory language. Another example would be in discipline information, the pronoun he is used a lot. As I continue with the presentation, you'll see that there are some disproportionalities in relationship to males in discipline. So because of that the makeup of the disproportionality, we would want to reconsider the use of he, since that is something that we see that there's a disproportionality, and we're working to make some adjustments. I'm going to share a recommendation in domain 2 that's related specifically to that particular finding. So in regards to the recommendations for Domain 1, which is structured systems and resources. The overarching suggestions would be, or recommendations would be, number one, develop a district equity team to serve in an advisory capacity to ensure equitable practices are intact in the district. The bullets provide you the specifics in regards to how to actually do that, around defining roles, developing an equity plan and vision, and defining equity for your district, reviewing data and setting some goals, and examining some of the current practices and resource distribution to ensure that resources are equitably distributed to students and policies and practices. The other recommendation would consist of assisting each school in developing a school-based equity team to serve as leaders in developing equity practices in the building. And the bullets just give you some specifics around how to do that, identifying the participants in the building, and defining the clear roles, and then creating school line improvement plans in relationship to the district goals, providing professional development, and then also aligning the process instruction and structures of the district equity team and the school equity team. One of the things I do want to do, because this is a lot of information, I'm going to take just a moment. Are there any questions with the first domain and recommendations?
Do we have any questions in reference to the first domain that she covered? Hearing none, you can proceed.
All right, I'm going to move on to our second domain. All right, domain 2, overall themes, is related to culture and community. As a district, Sumter demonstrates the ability to foster a sense of culture and community with its stakeholders. Family and caregiver surveys indicated that they felt comfortable with speaking to the school. 90% of the respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with this particular prompt on survey information. In relationship to, as I mentioned before, the discipline disproportionalities. So these are some of the statistical information. Male students account for 50.8% of all enrolled in Sumter School District, but yet the referrals for the male students in Sumter are at 85.8% for general referrals, 90.7% for in-school suspensions, and 68.9% of out-of-school suspensions. Black or African American students account for 64.7% of all enrolled district students, yet they were attributed with 85.4% of referrals, 82.8% of ISS, and 86.2% of OSS. And lastly, students with disabilities accounted for 14.2% of all enrolled district students, but yet were attributed with 26.1% of referrals and 31.9% of ISS and 29.5% for OSS. The recommendations as it relates to culture and community, the overarching recommendation is to enlist the entire school community with working to establish a supportive, continue to create a supportive environment focused on equitable outcomes for all students and a sense of belonging and agency among all educational partner groups. Some of the specific action items would be to work to elevate the district equity team as visible, recognized, and a leading voice in Sumter, and encouraging dialogue. And while it shared that the caregivers and families are feel very comfortable with talking to school-based, we want to continue to establish that culture of two-way communication with educational partners and family and caregivers by continuing to have a transparent process with all voices. And then lastly, this is related to the student handbooks. reviewing student and staff handbooks and district matrices to address any kind of discriminatory language or imagery. The other overarching way to address culture and community would be developing a system-wide expectation for the implementation of positive behavior supports and restorative practices, as well as a process for implementation, enforcement, and reporting of disciplinary matters. So we would get the support of the district equity team and district leadership to just review the various systems of positive behavior supports, and then identify one that really would work across campuses. We also would want to review the district code of conduct and just look for opportunities for more restorative practices to help to address some of the disparities within subgroups. And lastly, we would want to make sure that we're enlisting the support of special education department to ensure that practices are equitable for students with disabilities. So I'm going to come off and see if there are any questions in relationship to Domain 2.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Olson.
I do have a question concerning the information that we've received so far. I see a lot of disparities, and I know that equity goes hand in hand with poverty. And my question is, how was poverty taken into account in this equity audit?
Right. So in regards to that question, I think one thing I would want to put out is that when we're speaking in regards to issues around equity, it isn't just in regards to race, but also when you're looking at poverty, socioeconomic status, when you're looking at gender, it encompasses a number of things. So in regards to that, it was a part of the data analysis. We did look at students who would be considered to be in Title I spaces and free or reduced lunch, and then took into account that component as well. So to be more specific with your question is that we received general information in regards to status of students and socioeconomic status as well. And so that is a part of the data analysis that was done. And with regards to recommendations, that professional development especially will be a way to be able to zone in and look at strategies to support educators and also look at district practices in order to support that.
And one follow-up question. What is the time frame for the data that you collected, that you analyzed for this audit?
Did you say the time frame?
Yeah, like how far back did you go with your data collection?
So the availability of data, we were able, because we did have some challenges in regards to the pandemic with data piece, we were able to look at last year's data.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions before I move on? Okay. So for Domain 3, in regards to equity in the educator workforce, so one of the highlights that was an overall theme was that Sumter School District maintains a relatively diverse educator workforce that really was comparable to that of the district's student demographics. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we highlighted as a theme was, with the survey information, overall staff members had a high level of agreement in response to the district's effort to recruitment and retain staff members of color. And so you see the actual mean score there of 305 and 3.03. But as we further analyze the data, we did see that staff survey respondents that identified as Black reported a lower average of level of agreement in areas of recruitment and also in the area of retaining. Another component, we shared highlights in relationship to the following prompts. I feel like belong at the school, which you saw was definitely a 3.14, which was high. Feeling a valued profession at my school, which is another one that I shared as far as your assets. I feel supported in my job at 3.02, and then feeling happy and fulfilled in my job. Did score a little bit lower than the mean of the 3 points in which we would want. In response to the prompt, I have an equitable access to the best placement opportunities in my school district. What we did see is that the staff member survey response did show that 22% of participants disagreeing and strongly disagreeing. Specifically, respondents that identified as Black did report a lower average with agreeing to that statement. And so we were able, and as I said, these are overall themes in regards to findings, but we were able to kind of make a connection in regards that suggested that individuals that identified as Black were living a different experience as staff members in the district. And so here are some specific recommendations in regards to equity in the educator workforce. We are recommending that you develop and actualize the the talent management strategy in the district. This is just an ongoing development plan that would address recruitment, retention, and the development of a talent pipeline to encourage career opportunities and advancement through a lens of equity. Some of those specific items would relate to just identifying a team that's led by a member of Human Resources Department that would develop district processes and structures to support the active recruitment, retention, and advancement of staff of color, and the creation of systems and structures that would nurture their success. And some of those structures would be an induction program, and also developing a pipeline that includes opportunities for career growth for staff of color, participating in curriculum and school leadership team, district committees, and other leadership development opportunities. Any questions in relationship to that domain?
You may proceed. I haven't seen any indication of questions.
Right. I'm going to move on to our next domain. So domain 4, overall themes relate to professional learning and personal growth. The district and school leaders reported a lower level of agreement to the prompt. Professional learning opportunities are available to deepening staff's understanding of bias, racial, and cultural competencies. Now, Sumter staff reported a higher level of agreement to that same prompt compared to district and school leadership with a means of 2.93, which is roughly about 80%. And of note, when reviewing the professional learning schedules for Sumter School District, you did offer professional learning on academic-based content for educators. However, Insights analysts did not see professional learning content grounded in equity or cultural responsive teaching. So in regards to possible recommendations, the overall would be to continue to implement a plan for district-wide consistent professional learning with a focus on equity for all levels of staff, from district office staff members to classified staff. Some specific action items would be just to elevate the leadership of the district equity team members by providing opportunities for them to receive advanced, intensive equity professional learning so they could develop and deliver professional learning sessions for all of Sumter's educational partners. Working in collaboration with an identified external vendor to develop a multi-year training plan to ensure the professional learning schedule and providing content for all levels of staff. Ensuring that professional learning offered was guided by findings from the district equity district audit, as well as other sources of quantitative and qualitative data, including student outcomes. And lastly, to examine a evaluation tool and develop a stage plan to ensure that competencies and educational equity are made in an intrinsic part forming evaluations at all levels of the organization. Any questions in regards to that last domain? We're in the home stretch. You guys are being wonderful, and I appreciate it.
Any questions? You may proceed.
All right, and our last domain. This domain relates to curriculum, instruction, and learning. So the data that you're going to see is from last year. The orange line in the display is the district average of performance in these content areas or tested content areas and grade levels. And the only thing what I'm going to do is go through the slides to kind of highlight the specific subgroups that we do need to make sure that we're taking a deeper look in regards to how we can provide support. So this is third grade ELA. You see where the average is as far as the district achievement, which is the orange line. Black and African American students, we do see a gap, and we also see a gap with our male students in this area, our content area. The next tested content grade level is third grade math. While you see where the district average is, African American and Black students are performing quite a bit less, and you do see the gap. And also there is a gap with female students in this content in grade level. This is 8th grade ELA. We see for our male students and also Black or African American students that there is a substantial gap. This is 8th grade math. In this area, you're looking at male students, Black or African American students, Hispanic and Latinx. So students' access to academic coursework, particularly the International Baccalaureate programming and advanced placement subjects, are predominantly housed in one high school site, thereby limiting the access to students' enrollment in other district high school locations. There's also limited access to curriculum and resources which were further documented in focus groups with Sumter students, family caregivers, and secondary students. I'll give you just a minute to read some of the quotes from staff, family and caregiver, and secondary student in relationship to this particular domain. Recommendations that we're offering. The first one is to develop and staff an internal data alignment, data evaluation, and systematic review process. So one of the things that we shared was that there is a process, but one of the things that we want to look at specifically is opportunities and being strategic in a relationship to closing those achievement gaps. So we want to develop a plan to ensure consistent implementation of tiered interventions across grade levels and content areas. Some of the specific action items include chart internal program evaluation team with disaggregating and analyzing student performance data across subgroups at consistent points across the year. Developing a standardized method of data review at each building with the expectation of a written plan to develop the migration differences in achievement among subgroups. And lastly, just communicating a clear district theory of action regarding the importance of improving core instruction and tiered instruction. The last specific recommendation would be develop and expand current curricula and instructional materials in classroom practices in all content area to prioritize inclusion and equity. Using the findings from the review to develop a plan, ensure consistent implementation of curricula and acceleration access to advanced courses and enrichment opportunities for unrepresented students. Identifying a tool to conduct a curriculum material review to understand where gaps in inclusion and equity exist. Developing and revising curriculum based on findings and working towards ensuring representation of diversity of perspectives, authors, and characters, a focus of social justice and resources for customizing curriculum to meet students' unique identities, needs, and interests. And lastly, ensure that staff are incorporated these strategies and skills that they develop in professional learning, outline recommendations in Domain 4. I appreciate you bearing with me. Are there any questions in relationship to the last domain?
Are there any questions?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you as well. We do appreciate your thorough report, and I'm sure that we will be hearing from our director of that department. So we do appreciate your time and all the effort that you put forth in providing that report. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moore.
No problem.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
I don't have a question for Dr. Moore, but it's a question to the administration concerning the equity audit that we just received. There is just a general observation, and when we look at the academic achievement gaps, there's clearly some form of disconnect between our elementary and middle schools. If we see an achievement gap in 3rd grade where African American males are behind in ELA, but by the time they get to 8th grade, they're still behind. If you look at 3rd grade African American females, they're behind in math, but at 8th grade, they've caught up. And I know with our educators that are elementary educators, they're taught to educate the whole child. And so there's not any content-specific education or engagement on that front. But what are we doing as a district or as the Office of Academics to address these achievement gaps that we see here? And one other observation is that during our discipline presentations a couple of months ago, we saw that middle school African American males, and the equity audit showed it as well, showed the disparities when it came to discipline. And I see a clear correlation between discipline and the academic achievement gap. So I guess my question to the administration, what are some strategies or what are some things that we're doing? Because now we have 2 big data sets before us to try to address these issues, and I just wanted some clarification on what we're doing to move forward with this.
Who's prepared to answer that?
Oh, well, I can simply say kind of overarchingly that we are reviewing all of the information as I've stated in my goals and trying to come up with what works for us across both major areas that you have outlined. We obviously want to make sure that our environment is conducive for learning, which addresses safety and the review of the code of conduct and how we deal with student issues. But there's also a very clear-cut look at academics and how we address that and how we continue to improve. So whenever you do that, you got to look at a couple of things. First of all, obviously the equity of resources, which is addressed in these documents that we're looking at now. But additionally, you have to look at how students are being served and with what measures. So that gets you to the point where you look at programs and processes and how instruction is delivered and who is delivering it, and whether or not we are challenging students who need to be additionally challenged, yet we're reaching back and figuring out how to make sure that students who have additional needs are also served. All of this is coming, and this is certainly not an excuse, but it is an explanation. All of this is coming on the cusp of us trying to reconnect with schools, and we learned a lot about virtual learning and what works well about it and what does not. And so all of that gets us to the point where we have to leave no stone unturned to make sure that every child of 14,800 and some children that we serve in the Sumter School District gets the very best education that we can provide. So I won't stop until I make sure that we have exhausted every effort to try to do that. And so I don't know that I have a specific answer to your question, except that we're going to be constantly looking to make those adjustments and improvements. And I would challenge the members of the board to join me in that effort.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. You may proceed.
Madam Chair, I'd like to take a point of privilege, if I might, to go back to 5.2. I think Ms. Wright has arrived here, and we'd like to certainly take time and space to recognize her, if it pleases the board to do so at this time. So Ms. Wright, if you will come forward. And we are not related that I know of, but I'll certainly claim her tonight for sure. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to. So I'm gonna read about you again so that you can hear. I can get it pulled up. I know what happened, but I want to get it right. Okay. All right. So, Saravia, did I say that right? Okay. I wanted to make sure. That's what I said earlier. Tonight we're recognizing you. Oftentimes, especially in education, staff and administration are faced with emergencies every day. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize you tonight, Ms. Wright, for your composure and grace under pressure, and that allowed you to react in an emergency situation. Saravia Wright, who is a health science clinical studies student at the Sumter Career and Technology Center, jumped into action when visiting a career specialist who had a medical emergency. And tonight, I'd like to take this opportunity to salute Ms. Saravia Wright for her grace and skill under pressure. Congratulations, Saravia. I'm going to come around and present this to you. Let's give her a round of applause.
Put it down some.
There you go.
That's better. Put the sign down. Put your certificate down some. Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to chime in on what Dr. Wright said. I just wanted to highlight that Saravia is actually a product of Area 1, and she happens to be my little cousin as well.
All right.
Congratulations, Mr. Alston.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the board, if I may, I will now proceed to item 5.4, and we'll ask Mrs. Shatika Spearman, our Chief Financial Officer, to come forth at this time.
Good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Barbara Jackson, Vice Chair Dr. Frank Baker, our Clerk Dr. Darrell McGaney via virtual, Board members Dr. Wright and Ms. Scott. I bring to you the district's financial status related to FY 2022. As it relates to our revenue, it remained the same from the last report. And for our expenditures, the district spending increased due to the payment and the final posting of the retention stipends in the amount of $1,952,360.53. We also posted some corrections, accruals of expenditures that we received, that were received prior to June 30, that we charged to FY22 as well, for the audit purposes. So final expenditures for FY 2022 before adjustments, $123,035,545.87, and that, along with our transfers in and out, brings us to a expected final fund balance of $42,471,387.89. That is revenue in excess of expenditures in the amount of $9.8 million. And this is estimated as the audit is still continuing. As it relates to our current fiscal year 23, we have received tax revenue and some state funding, and right now we're at a 14.3% collection in the amount of $20,971,007 collected to date. As far as our expenditure budget, to date, we have expended about 21% of our expected budget. Again, some of those expenditures relate to our retention stipends related to our fiscal year 23 newly hired employees, where that amount increased expenditures by $281,583. Our audit is continuing as we make closing entries that will affect our beginning fund balance for fiscal year 23, and we project a current fund balance of using the expected fund balance from June 30, 2022, and the current activity thus far. We expect an ending fund balance for FY 23 estimated at $41.9 million. This is your financial report as of October 31st, 2022.
Are there any questions for Ms. Spearman?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Alston.
I just wanted to follow up on the question or the ask at the last board meeting concerning the arts. Were we able to have discussion with our school-based leaders and administration concerning funding for the arts programs?
We have began the allocation of the budget for the proceeds that we usually use the arts funding for. There was an amount of about $200,000 that we have allocated that we will bring before this board to make a final judgment, but we're waiting for some more estimates for the complete amount of the proceeds that we received. But that is a current line item that we will be bringing forward to you in the amount of $200,000 of those proceeds.
Any additional questions for Mrs. Spearman? Okay. That ended your report, Mrs.
Yes,
Spearman? Okay. Thank you so much for your report. Dr. Wright?
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, we have item 5.5, which is an update of policy EBCB, Safety Plan and Drills. And our presenter at this time is our Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Samuel Myers.
Policy EBCB, the purpose of that policy is to establish the basic structure for conduct of school safety plans and drills. The assessment section of that policy itself, we changed the title to indicate superintendent. That information is listed within the policy that you have. An additional adjustment was in fire drills where they indicated that a minimum of 2 fire drills. Fire drills are held monthly, and that adjustment was made. We got to the section on active shooter and intruder drills. It indicated there would be twice per year, and we would have just 1 per year. And that in itself changed the adoption piece from to 11-14-22. And those are the adjustments that were made to that.
Are there any questions for Mr. Myers? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Myers, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wright?
Madam Chair, members of the board, that concludes the superintendent's report for November 14, 2022.
That part of the superintendent's report. We do appreciate each of you for your efforts in providing the information requested. Per our agenda, the board will now enter into executive session for discussion of diploma petition, the monthly personnel report, discussion of compensation, employment, release, transfer of certified and classified employees, discussion of requests for grievance hearing, and discussion of Grace Academy's requests.
And school safety and security.
Yes, and school safety and security was added. As a reminder, there's not a set time frame for this portion of the meeting. We invite our in-person guests as well as our online viewers to join us again when we return to open session. If you are unable to be with us at that time, we wish you have a safe and pleasant work week. And we will not meet anymore prior to Thanksgiving, so we do wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Trustees, is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Madam Chair, I move that we enter into executive session for discussion of diploma petition, the monthly personnel report, discussion of compensation, employment, release, transfer of their certified and classified employees, discussion of requests for grievance hearing, discussion of Grace Academy's request, and school safety and security.
Second.
There is a motion and a second that we enter into executive session for the purpose of of the discussion of the diploma petition, the monthly personnel report, discussion of compensation, employment, release, transfer of certified and classified individual, discussion of requests for grievance hearing, and discussion of Grace Academy's requests, as well as school safety. Is there any discussion of the motion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The vote is unanimous, and the motion passes unanimously.
Of the Student A diploma petition.
I move that we approve Student A's diploma petition.
Second. A motion has been made in second that we approve that we approve the Student A diploma petition. Are there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The motion passes unanimously. Dr. Wright, do you have a motion for employee B?
Yes, ma'am. At this time, I'd like to recommend a salary adjustment for employee B.
Madam Chair, I'd like to motion that the board approves the salary adjustment for employee B.
Second.
A motion has been made and second that we approve the salary adjustment for employee B. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The motion passes unanimously. Dr. Wright, do we have a motion for the classified employees?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the board, I am recommending a salary increase for all classified employees that are employed by the Sumter School District, retroactive to October 31st, made payable December 15th, 2022 and beyond.
Madam Chair, I move, excuse me, to approve a salary increase for all classified employees no later than December 15, 2022, retroactively to October 31st, 22.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made to approve a salary increase for all classified employees no later than December 15th, 2022, retroactively October 31st, 2022. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The motion passes unanimously. Dr. Wright, do you have any other recommendations?
Yes, ma'am. I have a recommendation for the approval of a grievance request for employee A.
Madam Chair, I move to approve employee A's request for a grievance hearing.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Did someone second that? Was there a second? Okay, well, there is a motion.
Somebody seconded it. Who? Somebody on TV. Matt?
Okay, well, there is a motion and a second to approve employee A request for a grievance hearing. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The motion does not pass. We're now down to 8.2, the monthly personnel report. Dr. Wright, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, I recommend approval of the monthly personnel report submitted November 14, 2022.
Madam Chair, I motion that this board approves the November 14th, 2022 personnel report.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second that we approve the motion of the November 14th, 2022 personnel report as presented. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
Motion passes unanimously. We are now down to 8.3.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the board, I am asking for permission to pull back the approval of the first reading for policy EBCB for some additional consideration by administration. We're looking to have that first reading ready for the December board meeting.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to postpone the first reading of policy EBCB, safety plans and drills.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to postpone the first reading of policy EBCB, safety plans and drills. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The motion passes unanimously. We're now down to 8.4, approval of the third reading of policy.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, I'm recommending approval of the third and final reading of policy IJL and the addendum to policy JCA.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the third and final reading of policy IJL and addendum to policy JCA.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve the third reading and final reading of policy IJL and addendum to policy JCA. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote.
Supported.
The motion passes unanimously. The consent agenda, are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. And to all of our meeting participants and viewers, may you remain healthy and safe. We do appreciate your being with us this evening. Have a wonderful week and an enjoyable Thanksgiving. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 10:05. Thank you and have a great holiday.